Thanks everyone for joining. Really good to have this group together. This conversation, as you know, is for procurement.news. The goal is simple, a candid, experience-led discussion for procurement leaders. No slides, no selling, just what you're actually seeing in real organizations. Today, we are talking about reskilling procurement for the AI era. AI isn't a future concept anymore. It's already changing how procurement work gets done. What's less clear is whether teams are adapting fast enough, which skills are becoming critical, which ones are quietly losing relevance, and where leaders may be underestimating how big this shift really is. I'll keep this conversational rather than a panel-style discussion. I may move us along or jump between perspectives just to keep the energy and pace up. Let's do quick intros so listeners know who's speaking. And so maybe 30 to 45 seconds each, your name, what you're doing now, and the kind of procurement work you've been closest to. I'll start. I'm Divya Mishra. I work closely with procurement teams on contracts and renewals, which means I spend a lot of time seeing in practice where skills, processes, and decision-making either hold up or start to break down. David, do you want to go next?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No
So I'm David Loseby. In terms of what I'm up to at the moment, well, it's a portfolio of things. I'm a fractional professor of research in supply chain management at Leeds University Business School, which is a top 100 global university. I'm also editor-in-chief for 2 academic journals, Journal of Public Procurement and the Journal for Responsible Production and Consumption. And I'm also an advisor to many organizations, none of which I shall mention here, as it wouldn't be appropriate. But as they say, back in the real world, I stepped out of a role as the Group Chief Procurement Officer for Rolls-Royce Aerospace and Defence. So quite a mixed bag of things. So I now refer to myself as a pracademic, in other words, a practitioner and an academic at the same time. Thank you.
Glad to have you here, David. Kanda, maybe you could go next.
Okay, thanks, Divya. I'm Kanda Rozier. I am currently president of Collabra Consulting, where our focus is procurement transformation, organizational readiness, and interim leadership. I am a former chief procurement officer at multiple global companies and try to bring those experiences to bear with all the projects I do. And I'm excited to be part of the discussion today.
Yeah, wonderful to have you, Kanda. Larissa, why don't you go next, please?
Good morning, and thank you, Divya. My name is Larissa Cohen, and I'm a procurement expert with over 15 years experience delivering practitioner deliverables in indirect procurement across IT, HR, marketing, facilities, across the entire spectrum there, with some direct experience in my history. I am presently managing partner of continuous contracting, where we unite sourcing, project management, and customer service to deliver right-sized contracts through the deconstruction and reconstruction of outdated contracts with proven suppliers, as well as spot sourcing activities for all indirect categories of spend. I've recently joined Divya as an advisor at All Caps, and very happy to be here today.
Thank you, Larissa. And Pallavi, please.
Thank you so much, Divya. I'm Pallavi. I am a product leader who has spent a decade transforming the way companies manage their spend. And I've always been fascinated by procurement because it's the backbone of a business. And like we all know, it's still plagued by legacy friction. My goal in my role has always been to build software that just doesn't work, but actually makes customers measurably successful. And I'm so excited to be here today.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. So let's jump straight in. Pallavi, why don't you start? You've been in procurement and developing products for Coupa and others. What do you think is the impact of AI? How is it altering day-to-day procurement work today? Not in theory, but in practice, based on what you've seen.
Yeah, that's a great question. So today we are in 2026. And there's been a clear shift in procurement from, in terms of AI, from being an experimental hype to a bunch of practical utility applications. And it can give you examples. We have seen where, procurement over in the last few years, dirty data has been a big issue in procurement. And with AI, cleaning of this dirty data has become so much easier. Teams are using LLMs to normalize vendor names. So if I take an example of IBM, in my own experience, I've seen that, normalizing names such as IBM or I.B.M to international business machines, solving that problem with software becomes really challenging as the companies become more and more mature and have more and more dirty data. But with LLMs, this has become literally just one prompt, and you can clean up the data very quickly. Another good example where procurement teams are using AI is spec matching for RFPs. Again, in my experience, you would see buyers that would have to specifically tell suppliers, hey, use this specific unit, or, share your specs in this specific format, which led to a lot of inefficiency across the whole board, not only for the buyer to mention all of these specific things, but also for suppliers to respond to the RFP in a specific way. Spec matching for complex RFPs, again, has become extremely easy with LLMs. All of these vendor responses can go into an LLM, and the buyer can see the data and the responses in a format that they want. In addition to that, I've also seen when I was building sourcing products, scenario modeling is something that's extremely useful to drive great results. And so only companies that could afford all of these softwares, which gave you the capability to perform scenario modeling and run what if scenarios, could save a bunch of money. But with the LLMs and the progress that we've made up until now, even small and medium businesses can access very good quality software and run what if scenarios for their software and sourcing processes.
Yep, no, that makes a lot of sense. In fact, I built my entire previous business, DataX.ai, on structuring data, so I really know what that pain is. It's a huge pain across industries. Larissa, when you look at these current workflows, which tasks are clearly being automated versus augmented by AI right now, as you talk to different customers?
Divya, this is a great cue for me to share a spreadsheet that I put together to help supplement this discussion. And as
Sure.
Pallavi was talking, can everyone see?
Do you mind increasing the zoom a bit?
Sure.
If it's possible.
Sure.
It's yeah, looks good.
Super. So I think AI in procurement is helping in two ways, right? It's automating some of the repetitive tasks that we have, but also augmenting some of the strategic elements that we have. And you'll see, as Pallavi was talking, I was kind of ticking what she was saying to really align and echo what she was saying about dirty data. Purchase order creation and routing, there's a dirty data piece in there. And for each of the other areas that I've highlighted, the value that AI automation can bring to cleansing data will help facilitate and speed these tactical activities, but also increase the quality along the way. And then down the right-hand side here, I have a list of more strategic elements of procurement and sourcing where AI is in support, but not necessarily delivering the results, from supplier negotiations, helping to identify opportunities in proposals and to draw them out to support and supplement the development of a negotiation plan. More earlier phase activities, reviewing categories and historical elements to categorize and consolidate opportunities for economies of scale through category strategy development. Supplier performance management. A lot of these elements on the right-hand side are picking through existing contracts and leveraging what's left on the table. Executive reporting and storytelling is one that's quite passionate of mine, and that I'd like to see happen more in the market based on feedback from my constituents, and really helping to shape the narrative, because this helps everyone speak the same speak and align on the same goals. And then this next visual here is just a blended view of the procurement area. And what's automated and what's augmented, particularly here with supplier management. On the retrospective side, automating by AI, performance management can be researched, evaluated, and really measured to react in performance relationship management. So identifying what might have been left on the table, where performance can be improved, and where innovation can be expanded.
Wonderful, Larissa. Thank you so much for that. It's pretty obvious that there are several areas where augmentation and human involvement will continue to be needed. Kanda, what do you see as the most critical skills procurement teams are going to need to build over the next 3 to 5 years?
That's a really good point, Divya, because so many times I think now we hear the sort of fear mongering of AI, whether it's augmentation or not, will take away jobs. And I think what it'll do is change. It will change the job, and therefore, to your question, it changes the skills that are needed. I think that increasingly the focus is going to be on having skills going forward, and really at all levels of a procurement department, of negotiation, of communication, of critical thinking, and really of interpersonal collaboration. And that means, by the way, being able to collaborate with AI. It doesn't just mean with your internal and your external stakeholders and constituents. So I think that there's also going to be a very key requirement for, I know it may sound a little corny, but for employees to be AI savvy. I don't think there's going to be an option, and I think even now it's becoming harder and harder very quickly for someone to say, "Oh, I don't need to worry about that. That's somebody else's job." I think that embracing the change, learning enough about how do you embrace and collaborate to leverage what the changes will bring. And then I would say the final thing would be adaptability. We've all seen that over certainly, the pandemic required everybody to shift and pivot and, change directions umpteen times, sometimes in a day. But I think that as AI adoption becomes more and more prevalent, the necessity for employees and particularly at a leadership level to have adaptability as part of almost one of their core tenet skills is going to become really critical for long-term success.
Makes a lot of sense, yeah, Kanda. But there has to be a flip side to this, right? So, David, what do you think are the skills or capabilities leaders may still be overvaluing or holding on to? AI is here.
It's quite interesting because it leads me on from the conversation that Kanda has just articulated, because being one of those sad researchers, we tend to look at facts and do research on stuff in this space. And one of the interesting things I discovered was the World Economic Forum actually said that, the bad news is we're going to lose 92 million jobs with the whole advent of AI by 2030. However, on the flip side of that, it's going to create 170 million new jobs. So when people sort of think, oh, I'm going to lose my job type of thing, actually, there is actually a silver lining to this. However, it does mean that skill sets are going to change. And the other thing as well that I've been tracking for a number of years, which is what we call the half-life of skills. So the half-life meaning that 50% of your skills get replaced, if you like. And I would guess in the early 2000s, that number was about 10 years. We got to sort of somewhere around about the nearly 2020, and the half-life was about 5 years in terms of your skill set shift. They're predicting that within the next 2 to 3 years, the half-life of skills will be about 3 years. So the reality is that the shift is going to continue in that sort of direction of newer skills, and dare I say, with that then goes releasing old skills. So one of the things that I did in preparation for this was prepare a couple of slides. Which one of the things that you know, when you think about it from a CPO or from the point of view of a managerial role in procurement, the shift that we see is from control to collaboration. The shift from savings to value. So the classic sort of, it's all about the cost savings. Well, actually, no, it's all about the value. And even though some people might push really hard for, you know, I just want to see the savings sort of thing, I think it's you know, if you like, in the gift of the procurement profession to then say, yep, that's fine. That will be one of the metrics, but the others will be all about value metrics. And I think another shift is from expertise to behavior. And one of the things that I didn't declare earlier on was that I did my PhD in behavioral science. So I'm a bit of an oddity in terms of I sort of pursued, how can I put it, a divergence to my career, because it was all about change and transformation for me for many decades. So the whole behavioral piece is quite important in this. I think the other thing is shifting from that classic sort of process to outcomes. So, you know, we're just following the procurement process, but the stakeholders are all sort of like sitting there with their arms crossed, totally disengaged, because we're following this category management process, which they have no understanding of, no interest in, quite frankly, and all they're interested in, what's in it for me. And I think the other one then finally is this sort of shift from authority to influence. So the big influencers are hugely important. I think, you know, I did prepare, and I'm quite happy for you to share later, but you know, the classic things, and picking up on sort of what you know, all the other panelists have said really is this sort of shift from more agility and less bureaucracy, the shift from what the stakeholders want as opposed to what we want. And I remember using the term many years ago, calling ourselves the procurement police, and that we have to shift away from this sort of unfortunate title and become more and more in terms of not trying to create that fear of non-compliance in procurement. You know, the fact that, you know, we're breaking the rules and we're doing something different, and so therefore we have to be much better at what we call coaching, facilitation, behavioral insights. Hugely important. But interestingly, you think about, you know, the discussions around the flip from the other side of the coin to sales and marketing is procurement. Then we need to get much better at storytelling and influence, something that is not embedded, if you like, in the procurement vocabulary right from the very start. And so therefore this less sort of, I'll call it egocentric sort of approach to a more egalitarian, a more liberal sort of approach, if you like, in a sense, the way in which we execute our leadership and our engagement across organizations. So the whole essence of shifting contracts that are, even through our supply base, to being ones of being more collaborative, particularly where we're going into much more complex arrangements. And guess what? You know, the whole thing is shifting around us all the time in terms of the geopolitical landscape. I'm going to stop at that point because I think the essence is it's a shift from where we are today to where we need to be tomorrow.
Yep, no, completely agree, and I love your half-life analogy. I'm going to use that. I keep telling my son that you know, the kids of today would need to learn how to learn, because they cannot just sit on a degree that they've got and keep saying that, you know, give me a job for the rest of my life based on that. not happening.
No.
So I want to shift gears a bit to Pallavi. What I was thinking is if we could sort of, I think you talked a lot about data cleanliness, and also you talked about mapping of specs. Can you take me through, like, in the past, without taking names of any customers, what kind of difficulties that kind of caused having bad data? I think you and I have talked about supplier databases and things. And how would that change procurement going forward?
Yeah, I think one of the most common examples across, I want to say, all suppliers, and because of that, for all companies that interact with these suppliers, the challenge becomes that these suppliers, when you ask them for information, of course, everyone has their own mechanism to share certain terminologies, certain units, and so on. So let's say they're experts in a certain category. They might call the category A, and all the other suppliers in the same space might call the category by a different name. And so when we have a buyer who's looking for items within that particular category, it becomes much more challenging, even for a simple search, right? Like they have to mention all the different variations of that particular category. They might miss out a few, which means they might miss out a few opportunities. In addition to that, even data viewing. So let's say the buyer has bought a particular item that falls in a certain category over multiple years, and they want to consolidate the data. They want to see how much they've spent over the past year. Just figuring out how many vendors they've brought it from, and getting a report on those particular categories becomes extremely challenging if the data is dirty. And so across procurement softwares, there was an effort to bring in a mechanism that would help normalize all of these categories. For example, in certain geographies, we use UNSPSC codes to ensure that everyone uses the same code to mention a specific category. But since the data is dirty, even mapping those categories to UNSPSC becomes challenging. So, right from searching for the right data, from reporting, from making sure everyone is adhering to a specific code, becomes very challenging if you don't have clean data, and that results to what the other panelists were saying in terms of not understanding the value of all the transactions that have gone through your system.
Makes sense. Kanda, you've been in leadership roles for several companies, and it's easy to say reskill, right? But and we've all seen that in large organizations, that's easy to say, but very hard to execute. How do you think procurement teams are reacting now and would react? Because the change needed, as David mentioned, the half-life is keep constantly going down. The change needed is rapid, and are the folks really going to be able to reskill? And if so, what should be the process of reskilling?
Well, let me start by saying, and Divyab, I know you and I've had some conversations, and also Pallavi and David we've chatted a few times. I do tend to be a bit of a contrarian, so I'll put that as a caveat. I think that number one, I don't think that procurement teams and procurement leaders in the majority are acknowledging the change they're going to have to make. I think some of that is out of fear. Some of that is out of the and when I'm out of my bailiwick. So David, you may want to jump in and correct me on some of this as well. Some of it's out of fear. Some of it is out of fear of having to acknowledge what they don't know, and some of it is reluctance or uncertainty about changing. It's the I don't want to change mentality. And I think that's real. Now, that being said, I also know of both leaders and organizations who have embraced it as an opportunity to change. And I think this is going to be a classic example of clear characteristics that clearly define who succeeds and who fails. And my suspicion is that the failure group, at least over the next 5 years, will be much larger than the success group. Now, hopefully over time, we'll see that a shift occur. But I think I think that there is both reluctance and the sort of, it's human nature, I think. If I ignore something, will it go away? And I think there's still some, if I ignore it, will it go away? I think there's less of that now than there was 6 months ago. And again, back to the half-life discussion, I think there's a realization that this is moving faster than people had anticipated, and therefore there is going to be a necessary shift. And maybe it's, even if it's seen as I have to shift to survive, there'll be that, I think that trend will be towards change and adapting. I don't know that I answered your question, Divyab, so apologies if I went down a rabbit track.
No, you did to some extent. What I'm wondering is, do you see, like, and any of you can answer this, do you see sort of new roles being created to make that transition more easy? A lot of companies are attempting analyst roles or those that are more conversant with AI, sort of teaming up with those that understand procurement very well. Do you see that happening to aid the transition? Maybe Larissa, you could. Pallavi, maybe next.
Pallavi, feel free. I'll follow.
Sure. Pallavi, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
So as we were talking about this, one of the programs that a bunch of companies have introduced is the reverse mentoring program. And with this reverse mentoring, what's happening is the entire mentor and apprentice model is kind of flipping. And so effective upskilling looks like a junior person on the team mentoring a senior person, maybe a sourcing category director, in terms of how to use generative AI for market research, for example. And the senior teaches the junior about negotiation psychology. And a bunch of companies that have utilized this program, it points directly to what Kanda was mentioning about fear. It's someone who's very well adept at certain skills. They're kind of teaching each other and being vulnerable at the same time. So that's a program that has seen some success in the procurement world.
That sounds very interesting. Hopefully, the seniors are willing to learn from the juniors. David, you had some thoughts.
Yeah. I'll just chime in there with a couple of things on Canda's comments as well as Pallavi. I think for me, I remember taking a reverse mentor, believe it or not, about 20 years ago as a CPO, and being looked at as some kind of sort of, how can I put, somebody bang their head in the morning and not quite regain consciousness for the afternoon. And this was all in the advent of sort of, social media and all sorts of things like that, where that's not a world that I came from, hence the grey hairs, as they say. But taking on a reverse mentor was actually quite an important step. And actually, it was interesting because it wasn't just me that was impacted. Actually, the rest of the leadership team then went, oh, wait a minute, the boss is doing something very different. Perhaps we better learn from this. Perhaps we better see what this is all about. And so I do think it creates a bit of a ripple effect that's quite positive. And therefore, I do think leaders have a responsibility to sort of, and again, it comes back to what I was saying earlier about the shift in behaviors, really. So I would put that out there as being something that I know for a fact from personal experience does actually work and does make the rest of the team go, hang on a minute, what's happening here? This is very, very different. To Canda's point, one of the things that, again, the sad thing is you've got a behavioral scientist on the podcast. So I'm going to pick out a few things in terms of, we have 200 plus cognitive biases. So 3 of them that Candid referenced was what we call the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is simplistically put, which is unfortunately people are in positions of leadership or authority go beyond their competency levels because they've not learned new skills. We then got what we call the IKEA effect, which is not invented here. So this is about staying with where you are and what you're doing. And then the other one is called Semmelweis effect, which is basically, it goes back to a surgeon way back in the 1800s, was one of the first surgeons, because they did autopsies as well as surgery. They didn't used to wash their hands going from autopsies to then performing an operation on somebody. So the infections of the people that have just died being transferred then into the body of the person that was then being operated upon. And he said, no, you've got to wash your hands, because otherwise you'll pass those germs on to the next healthy person. And of course, they all poo-pooed it and thought it was a ridiculous idea, and it's just all blood, so what's the problem? And again, that's just another illustration of actually we need to change what we're doing and do things differently. And I think that's so true. So I'm gonna shut up now, because I probably said far too much already. So I'm gonna pass the microphone to you, Divya.
Sure. Larissa, why don't you go next, and then maybe Candid.
So what I'm reminded of is this role that was very critical in the 90s, and it was the role of the business systems analyst in the software development life cycle. This resource was critical to translate business requirements into technical expectations, not necessarily designing and delivering them, but explaining what the expected outcome was. And I don't see, to your direct question, Divya, these roles being recreated, but I do see that skill set being resurfaced, where procurement professionals really need to go back to start, and rather than sitting and waiting for requirements to be presented to them, they really need to sit with the business owner and understand what it is they need and why they need it in the level of detail, to understand how they're measuring these outcomes, but also what does done look like? It's this phrase that I use all the time. So taking that vision and bringing it to the beginning of the conversation to really understand what the expected outcomes are, and then leveraging particular technologies to help drive that. So that skill set, that EQ, along with the practitioner elements of following a methodology to deliver a contract, I see that being revisited.
Wonderful. Candid?
Yeah, just one last thought from me on maybe the part of the question I didn't answer, Divya, which is what does it take to make the transition? I think one of the things that gets overlooked, and I've seen this in a couple of companies, is a leader or department will say, I really think that AI can help us with certain tasks and outcomes. And particularly in my experience over my career has been largely centered around financial services. So banking and payment processing, regulated type industries. One of the things that gets overlooked is that there has to be a broader organizational corporate position on AI adoption, and what are the guardrails, what are the policies, what's the governance around it, and that any department, be it procurement or I don't know, accounts payable or logistics, that says I want to use this, I think it will help me. One of the first things I think they need to do is socialize within the corporate and regulatory landscape what's going to be required so that it will be embraced by the corporation, and that they won't encounter roadblocks, which then could slow down the bigger picture of moving towards embracing and really integrating AI as a part of the technology landscape.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's an organization-wide disruption that's happening, and if companies don't realize that, they're all going to suffer. Larissa, you and I have spoken a lot about negotiations in procurement, and that definitely seems like something that AI can't take over too soon. There's always a qualitative element to negotiations, relationship element. Sometimes you lose, or it may seem as if you're giving up on something because you want a much bigger relationship in the future. It's very hard for AI to handle these sort of variations. What are your thoughts on where AI will help and where humans will continue working, and especially negotiating contracts?
So I think AI is going to help set the foundation for the discussion, right? AI can give you the cost benchmarks, some risk insights, scenario modeling, and help set a platform and a foundation and a starting point. But the humans will need to be there to actually perform the negotiation. I think AI is very, very strongly suited at present to give us the data points that need to be validated, of course, but to set the preliminary discussions and set the initial post of where the outcomes would like to be driven to.
Yeah, makes sense. In fact, we've seen in the interactions we've had is AI kind of helps you figure out what are the variations, what are the different levers, what kind of negotiations can be had, what are the different elements in the contract that are open for negotiation. Because a lot of teams somehow get stuck with price and discounts and stuff like that, but there's a lot more to negotiate. So AI could potentially help you open your eyes to what's possible, and then eventually it's the human that has to do the negotiations. Kanda, do you want to add to this? I think we've also discussed this.
Oh, if I may, Divya, I'm sorry.
Yeah, please, Larissa.
Yeah, the time it takes to develop those positions and gather those metrics is countless. It changes all the time. So to have AI support to provide that snapshot in time of the objective data is invaluable. So much time is saved. I just wanted to add that point.
Yeah.
Right.
I would add, Divya, that specifically in terms of contract management, I think that AI can really help both in terms of quality of analysis and the speed of the analysis, help not just during the negotiation phase, but too frequently the person, the human, does the negotiation, the contract gets put into some repository or a file cabinet at worst case and forgotten about. But there is this life cycle management where I think AI can really become important, whether it's keeping a looking for, in a very quick and thorough fashion, SLAs that need to be tracked, rebates that are being overlooked, notice periods, right? How many procurement people have stepped on the landmine of, oops, it's going to auto renew because we didn't know, A, that it was auto renewing, and B, there was a notice period to prevent it. Those are the kinds of things that are very labor intensive and I would say subject, in my experience, to a lot of human error, and that they can really be helped. Again, to Larissa's point, the person, the human's still going to have to step in then and say, do we want to terminate? Do we want to auto renew? How do we go back and frame the fact that we've missed a rebate? But I think there's a big opportunity for ongoing contract management.
Yeah, David, I actually had a follow-up as well. Please respond to this. And then a question I had for you is, you and I have discussed a lot about contracts that are already negotiated, has a bunch of claims in them, and it just lies around and there's money leaking all the time. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Maybe you can take the shipping example. That was pretty interesting.
Well, the one term that I always use is there's what we call obligation management within the contract. I mean, the classic, I think Kanda, Larissa, and others have pointed it out. You've got a contract that's maybe 200, 300, 400, 500 pages long, and in some cases even bigger than that. And you go, crikey, how the hell, when I put a load of those in place, can I possibly juggle all of those plates simultaneously and keep my eye on the ball of all of those? It's just not possible. This is where AI can help in terms of what we call contract leakage and do all of those things. And one of the classic examples, in fact, I have to confess, I had to do it sort of rather manually a number of years ago, which was a absolute ball ache, because we had a situation where it took several weeks to go through a lot of contracts. And I said, I'm convinced, because we'd set the parameters of, I think, something like a 3 or 4% tolerance on the invoices coming in, or something like that for a company. But we were still spending way too much money. And so I said, look, let's just go through and do an evaluation, back to your point of the shipping. And we recognized that lots and lots of suppliers were adding shipping costs, as in the cost of packaging and shipping and all that kind of wonderful stuff, to their invoices. But it was getting paid because we'd set a tolerance on the invoices to auto pay them, thinking we were being really efficient and actually not sort of burdening the accounts payable department with all this sort of manual heavy lifting. But when we did the exercise, literally it ran into millions that we'd actually leaked out of the contracts, because we put in the contract that we won't accept shipping and packaging costs and all those kind of things, yet they were being added to the invoices on almost like a daily basis. And similarly, we recovered all that, tens of millions. And another example was, I said, just run me a report that says how many invoices per supplier are we getting per year. And there were some suppliers that were literally in the tens of thousands of invoices per year. And I went, this is just insanity, absolute insanity. Nobody needs to raise an invoice on that level of frequency. And I used to go back to the companies and say, I think we can make things a lot more efficient for you. You don't need to raise an invoice every time you ship something. Let's do an aggregated invoice every 2 weeks or every month, whatever it happens to be. In some cases, we cut the volume of invoices down by literally hundreds of thousands. So you can imagine the amount of man hours that consumed previously in just simply processing that stuff. And this is where AI really does, have a tremendous, how can I put it, value add to businesses. And it's those kind of things where people go, yeah, I just don't have the bandwidth to do that sort of thing. And it's true, because they're being asked to do lots and lots more things. And that's back to the shift in skills and things that people need to focus on versus the things that they don't have time for. And I think that these are perfect examples of where you say, this is how AI can really, truly help me deliver the cost savings. So I take that one off the list and I've delivered that. Now I can go on to the value add stuff over there. Oh, and by the way, accounts payable now love procurement, because we've declogged all of their inboxes. Fantastic. It's a win-win.
Yeah. No, amazing. This was, I think we can just keep going on for hours, especially when, all of us get together, but we do have limited time today. So I'm just going to transition to the last phase of this event. Okay, so let's finish with a quick fire round, perhaps. Instinctive answers, please. Short and punchy. I'm just going to go through each of you and have a quick question. So one skill every procurement professional must build now, Pallavi.
I think it's data skepticism. It would be the ability to look at AI-generated strategy and instantly spot hallucinations or all the biases that we've been talking about.
That's a good one. Yeah, Kanda?
I would go back to my earlier comment. I think it's adaptability. It's adaptability, acknowledging your biases.
Certainly, David.
I think for me, it would have to be sort of what I call emotional and behavioral intelligence, because that's not the sort of stuff that comes out of the, and it says he's sitting in a university courses and professional bodies. They don't teach that stuff. That's the stuff that people are missing. Absolutely must do that. Must.
Larissa?
The ability and desire to really understand the business problem.
Absolutely. I think that's key. Okay, next question. One capability AI will make table stakes. Larissa, why don't you start this time?
Yeah, there are a number, but I think the one that is probably the most ready for adoption is negotiation support and contract management. So I said one, but I meant two: negotiation and contracts.
Sure. Pallavi?
I would say it's instant spend visibility, understanding your spend and getting answers to questions in natural language is going to be something that's going to be table stakes.
Certainly. David?
I think I would go back to my example of just obligation management. The fact that we've got so much written into our contracts, they're well constructed, but guess what? When they're handed over to contract management, they don't know they're there. So therefore you lose all that value.
Kanda?
Supporting governance and risk management and tracking.
Okay, and the last question. So one area where humans will remain irreplaceable, we all need this assurance. Kanda?
I think it's negotiation, whether that's with external suppliers or internally to your company.
Larissa?
Second.
Yeah. Same here. Pallavi, what do you think?
I think so too. It's empathy-driven negotiation. AI can calculate the optimal price, but it cannot look the supplier in the eye and gauge if they're hesitating because they are bluffing or because they're about to go bankrupt. So that gut feel and trust building is 100% human.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to talk to an AI. David?
I think mine would be slightly different insofar as, particularly having lived through the COVID period, it's something that we call social contract skills, in other words, social contract theory, which is about saying, if I've got a relationship with somebody, and I'll explain the situation whereby you've got fixed term contracts with fixed volumes and all that sort of thing. When things like COVID kick in or other things, guess what? It's relationships that will fix that stuff. It will not be an AI chatbot that will fix that, because that's just outside of that domain. So I think that's where the social contract between individuals is absolutely paramount, and I don't see AI replacing that anytime soon.
Thanks, David. I want to build on that last point about empathy, relationships, and the social side of procurement. If there's one thing that comes through clearly today, it's that AI will change how procurement works and gets done. I think we all agree on that, but it doesn't replace the human judgment that sits underneath it. Skills like empathy, trust building, and understanding context don't show up neatly in systems or prompts. So it's very hard to replicate. They're what turn transactions into partnerships, and they're often what determine whether technology actually delivers the value or not. So as teams reskill for the AI era, the opportunity isn't to become less human, it's to be more deliberate about where human judgment really matters and reskill on those elements. So thanks again to all of you for the candor and the perspectives. Really appreciate the time. Thanks to everyone listening. Thank you.